How many times have we heard the Fed uses old data, lagging data, they're out of touch, the surveys, all this nonsense they do are tools of yesteryear? Well, the good news is, folks, there's actually some applications or sites that you and I can go to look up what is going on right now. We're going to look at two of those today, one being TruFlation and the other being GDP Now. In order to have the discussion, I'm going to have the one and only Taylor from Life Goal Investments. Man, how you doing?
Doing great. Yes, everyone is always skeptical. The government doesn't use real numbers, all that nonsense. It's what we have to look at, so let's look at it.
Exactly. And again, they've been doing it for a long time. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes it a long time, right? And when you have data,
it does make you able to look at apples to apples comparisons too.
You can trend it, right? For me, it's not so much the number, it's the trend, it's the velocity, it's inflection points, all of those things. And you get that when you study this for 22 years. When you're in it for 22 weeks, it really doesn't make sense to you at all. But I thought I would do is bring up a couple of sites that are relatively new. TruFlation, I think, has been out for a little while. I've only recently discovered it thanks to Danielle DiMartino Booth. But I'm going to share it on the screen so other people can look at it. It is updated almost daily, I believe. So let's share the screen. And Taylor, can you see that?
I can see it. Yep, you got it right there.
Yeah, so basically, again, TruFlation is a site. Just go to truflation.com. You see it there in my web browser. It does it for the US and I believe the UK. Let me make sure it does. I think it does. I looked at it this morning. It does on my phone anyway. So the UK is in there somewhere. The UK is looking pretty bad at 13.99. But yes, the US here at 3.04. And I would call that trend lower. Wouldn't you, Taylor?
Boy, that doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out.
Yeah, it's fair to say that the interest rate is falling, or not interest rate, sorry, inflation rate is falling. Again, the U.S. rate is reported to be 4.9. It too is falling. It too is lagging, housing being the largest component of that. But again, they post the methodology if you wanted to read it is there. Oh, here's the UK. I knew the UK was there somewhere. Oh, the UK is now 13.98.
What's interesting, so as you just clicked over to the UK, what you see that's interesting here is the UK's inflation point didn't peak until January of this year, whereas the 1-year number takes us back to almost exactly the peak point here in the United States last year in June.
Yes. Yep. Late June, it looks like. Yep.
Yep.
That would have been.
Yeah, this is awesome.
So June 18th would have been the peak, cycle peak, 11.97. So again, it's coming in. I think there's, again, we get a big inflation print. I think it's the 11th or 12th of June. You get the base effect, you get all these things coming. I think the next 4 months, the lagging indicators come in, and it wouldn't shock me if in 4 months, the Fed CPI headline is under 4%. It wouldn't shock me.
Right. And what's interesting is you see to the bottom right portion of this graph starting in April, you did get a tick up in inflation. And this is what's causing kind of the confusion in the market right now, because the Fed is using that to say, hey, we might have to continue to raise rates as inflation is looking stickier as we've taken those easy pieces, Michael, that you always speak of out of the equation. Now we're getting to the tougher stuff. And the market's still saying, hey, we don't believe you, but the market has changed their opinion over the past month, where the market was anticipating 3 25 basis point cuts by the end of this year. So 75 basis points lower than we're currently sitting at right now. And now they're only pricing in 2. So that is part of the market and the Fed coming closer together. The Fed is still saying 0. The market's now saying 2 cuts by the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm curious because, again, I think coming out of the Fed meeting, the chances of a Fed rate cut were possibly as soon as July. I think they backed up to like September or no?
Yes, there is a 40% chance, I believe, somewhere in that ballpark of a cut in September, down from about 50% when it hit its peak.
Yeah. And then the other thing, again, if you you do this on your computer, you're going to get a lot more data. They do it daily, weekly, monthly. And again, it's pretty clear in quarterly. The inflation trend is heading lower.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that is a welcome sign to all Americans at this point.
Yeah, and let's look at housing. Let's just look at housing. And this, again, is the lagging indicator, right? Housing was as high, 15%. And, now it's coming in at,
and I wonder if you back that out even further, if that was actually a higher percentage, because at one point, houses were up 21% year over year. Now, I don't know everything that they're looking at here, but just as kind of a, 21% was the year over year increase that houses had seen at one point.
Oh, clothing's been all over the part. What about?
It's
Oh,
interesting. The buying habits. Yeah, this one's interesting. Take out that weird spike in alcohol and tobacco, and what you realize is that alcohol and tobacco. Now, this is inflation, but the demand for alcohol and tobacco really doesn't change.
no, it
Barring
doesn't change
the
much.
environment, the economy, win or lose, people are going to booze. I guess is the takeaway there.
Exactly, exactly. Transportation, and then of course food and beverage. So again, folks, if you want to take out a look at inflation, I would, you can obviously look at what the government does, but I would recommend adding TruFlation.com is one of your bookmarks. I would strongly recommend it just to kind of stay up to date. Again, and I would read their methodology, but obviously don't have time for that. I'm going to change screens, but I'm not sure this is going to work. Did it change for you?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, good. Hey, look at that. Technology works. So the other site I would go to is, I refer to it as GDP Now. It's actually the atlantafed.org. And what they're doing is trying to take a real-time look, or at least a weekly look at GDP. Is it growing or shrinking? It has been historically far more accurate. And then the last reading was of last week, the 17th. You can still see coming in at 2.9%. And you can obviously see kind of the consensus versus what Atlanta Fed is doing. And again, this is updated at least weekly with what's going on.
And what's important to recognize about this site specifically is that this is all quantitatively driven. This is no one's opinion or
Oh,
forecast.
data. Yeah.
They put the data in, and the data represents an algorithmic number that gets spit out on the other end as to where they expect the next GDP print to come in. And this gets updated anytime a meaningful statistic comes out on the economy. So it's relatively volatile. I will say that. So last quarter, it was really high, like it is this quarter, 2.9. I think, as you can see here, most analysts think it's going to be significantly lower than that. And that was the case last quarter as well, until right before the actual print came. And within the last week, the number came down from above 2%. I think it was even above 2.5% to right on the screws at 1.1, right prior to the actual announcement of GDP for Q1.
So this will be things like retail sales, right? Big economic data that they slam in, put in the data.
PMI,
okay,
how are the manufacturers doing? They look at a broad swath of every important economic data kind of barometer that we have out there.
Right. So these are two sites that I'm starting to look at. Taylor, do you have any other that may be common or uncommon that people look at that we should recommend?
Yeah, so just another one on inflation. Cleveland Fed, and I think it's something now that they call it as well. I just have it bookmarked, but the Cleveland Fed also projects out inflation. So not GDP, but inflation, what inflation will come at during the next print. So it's an interesting way to see, again, just data-driven, algorithmically based on numbers, not based on anyone's opinion, where inflation is going in the future.
Yeah, very cool. Again, folks, there's lots of data out there. Again, we could wait for the monthly or government statistics, which again, I look at because I have 22 years of history. Again, I look for inflection points, rate of change. But if you want to look at for more recent data, you have GDP Now and TruFlation, and I will give a look to Cleveland Fed. Taylor, where can people find you? And again, I love it when you do your rants on Instagram.
Thanks so much, Michael. Yeah, follow us on Instagram and on TikTok at Life Goal Investments.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you.
Thank you.